when you're in the position of influential power where you have the ability to access literally millions of people, you also got to be careful of how many of those people could you be harming. Be that intentional or not, there are still people who could be hurt in the process, and that's something you really need to consider. In all honesty, I can't remember the last time I had so many requests to cover 2 videos, to be honest. I've had this video heavily requested, which is looking at Sarah's day and her Sweat It Limitless program, in addition to how she's advertising that program. And also, I've had a lot of requests to cover Blow Galates again, who I didn't want to touch on again, but she's recently embarked on a 90-day journey. I've had a lot of people saying, Harry, I think you need to look at this, which I will, but that's for next week. Today, like I said, we're going to cover Sarah's day, and we're going to split the video into 2 sections. The first section, we're going to talk about the posts in which she advertises and promotes this program. The second section, which could be the second half of the video, or maybe even more than that, we're going to look at the program itself. If you like this video, please let me know you like the video by liking the video. 1,100 likes in the first 24 hours is the goal, so if we could reach that, that'd be bloody splendid. I would very much appreciate it. Please do consider clicking the red button down below and subscribing to the channel, and maybe even the bell next to it so you get notified when I upload every week, twice a week. Only subscribe if you feel like I am worth your investment and your time. Regardless, I just appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch my video. And at the end of every video, I do comment question of the week, in which I answer a question from the comment section. So if you have a question, drop it down below and I shall answer it. But if you're new to the channel and may not be aware, that last year I was wearing a hat pretty much through every video as like a bit of a challenge. And everyone's saying, Harry, what are you going to do next? 2022's around, the hats are gone. What's next? And I've been pondering the thought for a while. I think the most requested and suggested replacement, we'll say, has actually been eyewear. But today, we'll go give it some slight Ozzy Osbourne vibes with this eyepiece, we'll say. Everything's purple. I can't really see very much. It looks like Thanos has consumed my screen. I think to start, we're going to look at the campaign together.
To the girl who lays in bed every night and overthinks everything she ate that day. To the girl who forces herself to stay at the gym for over an hour. To the girl who dwells in guilt if she misses a workout. I was you. Getting myself to this point was far deeper than just the physical. It was about changing my mindset and creating a lifestyle. Nourishing my body, listening to my body, moving because I love my body, not because I'm trying to fix it. So shout out to the girls who have come full circle and can rest in balance. Consistency over burnout, balance over restriction, and finally, listening to our bodies.
It's interesting because when I looked at this earlier, the first top comment that had something like 2.5, if not more than that, 1,000 likes was pointing out not issues but criticisms with the campaign and how she was presenting it regarding potentially targeting those who may have suffered or are currently suffering from an eating disorder. Like I said, it was there when I checked earlier, but it's not there anymore. I have never suffered from an eating disorder, as you likely know. Obviously, this is a very touchy subject. When you go into the realm of mental health and eating disorders, I think you need to be very careful with how you approach things. And I will always try and be as careful as possible, but also as honest as possible. I wasn't aware of this campaign, this kind of program, until many people sent it to me saying, Harry, look, can you have a look at Sarah's day? She's recently released this, and I feel like it's targeting those with eating disorders. A lot of people did actually reach out and express how they are in recovery, and they felt quite triggered by this, which again is completely understandable and completely valid. And obviously, due to my lack of personal experience with eating disorders, I wanted to kind of gauge a bit more of an understanding, so I put it on my Instagram story in which I asked people what they thought of this, and I wanted to read your replies and just get a bit of a better idea of how this could be impacting others who may well have suffered. The vast majority of people were expressing a discomfort and upset, suggesting that she's gone about this the wrong way, perhaps, as potentially somebody who has suffered themselves, they felt quite targeted. I think the thing that influencers and content creators need to remember is that when you're producing content or advertising content, whatever it may be, I think you have to be extremely careful and conscious of what you're doing and how you're doing it. I'm sure Sarah's intentions behind this were good, but I can understand how people could perceive this as targeting those who are currently suffering or have previously suffered with an eating disorder or something similar.
To the girl who lays in bed every night and overthinks everything she ate that day. To the girl who forces herself to stay at the gym for over an hour. To the girl who dwells in guilt if she misses a workout.
I completely understand how it likely comes from a place of care, hopefully. Again, I don't know Sarah personally, you never know intentions, but I'm hoping and giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, and I'm hopeful that she is doing this to try and help people. But I do understand how the way she's going about it may not be the best, in the sense that it's kind of targeting those who are kind of showing potentially disordered behaviour. The initial address at the start in which she's talking to them, I can understand how that could be perceived as maybe targeting them. It's almost being implied, maybe not directly or maybe not intentionally, but it's almost being implied that you can overcome whatever hindrance you're currently facing, be that potentially an eating disorder, by investing in one of Sarah's 8-week programs, which I'm going to be honest with you may not want to hear it, you may not like to hear it. Doing this 8-week Limitless program is not going to stop the disordered behaviour. It's not going to stop the demons that may be consuming your thoughts, that may be consuming your lifestyle, and may be consuming how you behave on a day-to-day basis. It's a lot deeper and a lot more serious than adopting a new exercise program. I'm sure for some people it may help. This will not be the immediate resolution you may well be looking for. And this will not be the resolution that Sarah may be implying it will be. There is a chance that you could seriously harm and actually hinder somebody's progression. And maybe, God forbid, trigger them to relapse and maybe even potentially regress, which is not what anyone wants to see. It's definitely not what I want to see. It's definitely not what I want to hear. I've done a few videos in the past which have kind of touched on the eating disorders and how the content of others could be triggering them. I think the biggest one for me was when I did the video on Emmy Wong. So many people, when I say so many, I mean I'm blown away by how many people reached out to me and were brave enough to tell me their stories, to tell me how they were feeling, tell me the struggles they have been through, which again I appreciate more than anyone will ever understand. To be honest, having that level of trust from you guys is genuinely a privilege, and I will never break that. But it was also very upsetting. Since that kind of event, although I've obviously been aware of them, obviously my master's degree is in psychology and we very much covered eating disorders, it has opened my eyes up a bit more to how things like this could be triggering. Because in all honesty, due to lack of experience, sometimes I may find it a bit harder to understand, which is why I ask you guys to give me your insight and your input, because you can help me understand. Because I do think without experiencing myself, my understanding is limited, and I will acknowledge that. I'll hold my hands up saying, you know what, I haven't personally suffered from an eating disorder, but if you have, hopefully you feel represented, hopefully you feel heard when I do speak and try and do what I can to bring light to issues that may be a bit overlooked in the industry. And I appreciate you feeling comfortable enough to share your struggles and your battles with me. I think that level of vulnerability is something that is not to be taken for granted. I think it's also something that I will never neglect, I will never abuse, and I will always appreciate and respect. So again, thank you for that. I get that Sarah is likely trying to help people. I would hope so. She does encourage people to live a more active and healthy life, which again, I would always appreciate somebody helping others do something, despite whether I agree with their message or not. I will always try and find some mutual appreciation and respect. But again, when it comes to just how this is being worded and how this is being targeted, I don't know if this is due to lack of knowledge, maybe, or lack of empathy without meaning to. I don't think it's done well. I think it could have been done a lot better. Like I said, I sincerely hope this was not intentional. I know this is the third installment of the Sweat It series. I have the other two as well, so if you want me to look at them in a future video, I will, and I can. But I thought this would be appropriate considering the program is very much relevant and related to the video we've previously seen. I'm not going to spend a mass amount of time on the program because it's 105 pages, and in all honesty, I could talk about this for hours. I just don't think you could tolerate me talking for hours. So how many days a week are we training? So we're training between 4 and 5 days a week. Interesting. I think, again, it depends on the person. What are your goals? If your goals are to optimize hypertrophy, for example, fine. I think if your goals are recovery from something like an eating disorder, please acknowledge that doing too much is a problem. And I think the sad reality is many will claim that they've rebuilt their relationship with food and now have a healthy relationship with food, but will subconsciously develop an unhealthy relationship with training. And by that I mean they may improve their eating habits, but they may train excessively to almost make up for the additional calories they may be consuming, or as maybe a punishment to then make them feel like they can eat how they're desiring to eat, despite how much progress you're making and how proud I am of you for doing so. That is something that cannot be overlooked, and I think that is something you need to acknowledge. And if what I've said has maybe related to you and you thought for a second, well, that could be me, I want you to acknowledge that it's not your fault. And I think adopting those behaviours is very understandable, especially considering what you've been through. And I don't want you to ever think that you are no longer progressing or this is a sign of regression. I think developing the healthy relationship with food is a huge step in the right direction. This is merely another speed bump you have to overcome. The objective of the workout, obviously saying they want to build muscle, tone and sculpt, shout out Chris Uchella, increase strength, strength, improves stabilizing muscles and core activation. I don't like the word activation because it implied that it's turned off. It's not the case. If your core was turned off, you'd probably be quite flaccid on the floor right now. Not a good time for anybody. Toning legs. So we've got hero and... But I'm reading sideways. Oh, it's going to hurt my neck. So barbell squats. I respect the inclusion of barbell squats. I do respect that. I do appreciate that. So let's talk about things. Again, I'm going off the assumption that the primary purpose of you doing this program is to build muscle. That's the assumption, because that was top of the list here. Do you have to do squats to develop great legs? Absolutely not. Please never feel like you do. You don't have to do anything. I think they're a good movement. Do I think they're the best for hypertrophy? No, and I can explain. One of the things you've got to consider when looking at hypertrophy is how safely you can take that movement to failure. I think it's quite hard to take barbell squats to failure safely because there is a high chance of quite severe mechanical breakdown. So I mean like technique breakdown, which also leads to an increased risk of injury. But like I said, the squat is still a good movement. Please don't get me wrong. I squat personally. I like them and they make me feel like I'm cooler than I actually am. 8 to 12 reps, that's a fine rep range. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that to gain muscle you must train between 8 and 12 reps. That's not true. Ultimately, you can grow in any rep range pretty much, but the things you have to consider are almost like the kind of like tax trade-off. You're like, oh Harry, you can grow in any rep range, so I'll do sets of 1 rep. That's a lot of fatigue for not a lot of stimulation. You're not going to kind of accumulate sufficient volume doing loads of sets of 1. You're going to fatigue very quickly. Therefore, it's not really a great trade-off. I usually say, personally for myself, I kind of hover between the 6 and 20 rep range. It's just kind of finding that trade-off between how taxing a movement is, how much volume you can get from a movement, and how much effort you can output consistently. I'm not a huge fan of pulse-based movements. Again, they will burn, they will hurt because you are maintaining tension for quite a long period of time. But ultimately, the thing to consider is the muscle is not getting very lengthened, so you're not getting a big stretch of the muscle, and it's not getting very shortened either, so you're not fully contracting the muscle. You're kind of hovering in that mid-range. Dumbbell reverse lunge is fine. I probably, normal lunge is fine as well. It's just a lunge variation. You do you. Dumbbell sumo squats. How she's kind of hold it there looks more like a deadlift. And pulse, again, I'm not a big fan of the pulse. Bridge hold and abductor. Again, pulses, I'm not sold, I think. Squats, fine. Squat pulses, probably bin. Dumbbell reverse lunges, fine. Explosive reverse lunges, maybe bin. Dumbbell sumo squats, sure. Again, but I think the dumbbells could be a bit of a limiting factor when considering how close you can go to failure, i.e. it's going to be hard to really go to failure on these movements. What I would likely do, personally, if we look at the legs as an entirety issue, because she's not really hammering much with the posterior chain there, I'd probably go like a barbell squat, an RDL, a split squat. I probably wouldn't split squat and lunge at the same time. Maybe a glute bridge if you can. And then you can just kind of toy around with the last movement. It could be something like abductors themselves or adductors, something along those lines if you have the facilities to do so. I don't think you need to exceed more than, let's say, 5 or 6 exercises in a day here, which she's not. She's doing 6, which I respect and appreciate. I don't like when you're kind of isolated to a single kind of set of reps, like 12s, because ultimately if you're going to, if not close to failure for 4 sets, which to optimize the building of muscle you do need to be going to or close to failure, it's going to be really hard to match that many reps for that many sets. I wouldn't stress too much about rest periods. If your goals are gaining muscle, rest for as long as you need, but also don't take the piss. You need to rest enough for you to have the best chance of being able to output as much energy and force in the following set. So I rest for like 2 to 4 minutes, for example. The big thing to remember for workouts like this is progressive overload. I don't care where your starting point is, I just appreciate the fact you've started, but what I want you to now do is every time you train, every time you do this workout, if this is a workout you're going to do, I want you to do a little bit more than you did last week. Be that some extra reps, a little bit of extra weight, whatever it may be. You keep track of how much you're lifting and how many reps you're doing. You could do a bit more every week. That's your homework. So that's what we call progressive overload. And that is a fundamental principle of building muscle. Just ensure before you are worrying about how much weight you're lifting and progressive overload, ensure you're lifting properly. So we talk about movement patterns. So make sure your movement patterns are solid. Your technique is good, it's safe, and it's efficient. Then you can start bumping up the weight and progressively overloading. Toning legs. Okay, so there's more. So to finish the circuit, so this brings in more of the caloric expenditure stuff. Interesting. Would you call it cardio? I guess you would call it cardio to some extent, just a different type of cardio. I like the demonstrations. He's called, I don't know if you can do videos. Oh, you can do videos. That's bloody good. That is, honestly, I actually respect that. It really is something special. Dumbbell chest press on the floor. If you do have a bench, that would be ideal because you get a bit more of a stretch, better range of motion. A big thing I actually want to point out is the dumbbell chest press. You see her elbows are quite flared. I would highly recommend, if you are looking at the chest itself, tucking those elbows in about 45 degrees. So rather than holding dumbbells like so, turn them in slightly, start pressing at 45 degrees. It's a bit nicer on the shoulder joint, and it also aligns better with the fibres of the pec. There's a big myth that, oh, you want to work your chest more, flare your elbows. Don't do that. Tuck them in. Single arm extensions, you could play around with this. You could do them in front of you. You could bring the elbow behind you if you want to bias certain heads of the tricep a bit more, so that's fine. Bandit is good substitute if you don't have a cable. I don't like how on this upper workout, which is not doing any back work, but I would likely go 2 chest, 2 back, 2 shoulder, and a core ab-based movement. That's how I work things. Because if you're doing any press movement, so overhead press, flat press, whatever it may be, because there is extension of the elbow, so the arm is going from bent to straight, you're working the triceps. If there's any flexion of the elbow, like any pulling motion, like dumbbell rows, for example, on top of the back, because there is elbow flexion, so the arm is going from straight to bent, you're working the biceps. So for that reason, I don't think you really need to include direct arm work. You could substitute it for maybe more important muscle groups, like I said, the chest and the back, etc. The challenge run ball slams, there's a lot of cardio here, a lot of calories being expended here. As many rounds as possible. That's intense. That's something. And I think the issue I have with this is this kind of goes into what you guys were saying to me about there's a lot of calorie expenditure and kind of like cardio work included in this program. 20 burpees, you're 30 burpees. I'd like fall asleep. Actually, that's a lie. I wouldn't. I'd be in too much pain. I'd be crying. My mum would come find me and she would carry me home. No, she wouldn't. I'm far too heavy for that. Again, there's so many ways you can approach things, and by no means am I a qualified therapist. By no means am I a qualified doctor. None of those things. I'm only stating that from what I've seen from those who are overcoming eating disorders and who are kind of at the stage in their recovery where they are in the gym, the focal point is usually less around cardio and more around doing the weights and kind of building again, rather than trying to take away. This cardio focus, as I said earlier, can be used to mask the fact that they are getting better with their eating. So it's almost like their calorie intake increases, but so is their expenditure. Or like I said before, it's used as a punishment, which again you have to be so careful of. I'm gonna be straight with you, although not the same, there are similarities. As somebody with a lengthy history of self-harm, I can to some degree understand why you may be punishing yourself. I can to some degree understand how difficult it is not to punish yourself, and I can also actually understand how you may not deem this to be a punishment. For example, with me, the self-harming would either be due to punishing myself for something I had done or something I had felt, like feeling a certain way and hating how that made me feel, or it would be also because sometimes I found it really hard to understand and overcome emotional pain, where I found it was much easier for me to understand and overcome physical pain. So when the emotional pain got too much, I would then hurt myself physically because I could see that, I could feel that, that could heal. Whereas the emotional pain, I didn't know if it was going to heal, sort of thing. So again, sadly, I do understand, and I will express this now, as I always do. If you are struggling, if you do feel like you need somebody to talk to, or if you maybe just want someone to talk to, you can contact me directly. Obviously, my Instagram is always linked below. It's at the start of the videos. It's always lingering. It's at Harry_TFNL. The TFNL Discord is a fantastic community, and there is a mental health like Need to Talk channel in there. And a lot of individuals within that server, unfortunately, have or are currently struggling with eating disorders. So I don't know if talking to people who might be in a similar boat to you could be helpful, but if it is, that's always linked down below. Even at the end of the TFNL tier program, which is again linked below, there are some UK and US mental health resources. I can't necessarily resolve the problem, but I can listen, I can be here, I can support, I can do what I can to try and help. I'm seeing a severe lack of pulling motions, and by pulling motions I mean like row-based motions for the back. I'm also seeing quite a lack of hamstring work, which actually isn't uncommon. A lot of these programs do often lack posterior chain work entirely, and that kind of goes into the realm of the back, the hamstrings, etc. But I've heard that Sarah isn't actually a qualified personal trainer, and you know how I feel. I don't like it when people are selling and producing these programs for money, essentially, without being qualified, which is like a driving license. You know, you've got the license so you can practice, you've got the qualifications so you can practice, sort of thing. Again, but it doesn't dictate or determine your worth or your ability. I just want to clarify that. This is sad for me to see because, like I said, although my understanding is limited due to my lack of experience, I will always try my best to understand, and I am understanding. I think I can completely see how those who are suffering or have previously suffered may feel like this could be targeting them, and in all honesty, I would align with that. The first time I watched it, I was a bit uncertain, but the more I watched the campaign and the video, I was a bit like, actually, now I can see it a bit more. And the more people were telling me, saying they felt like the opening statement and her voiceover at the start was directly talking to people who had previously suffered. I didn't pick up on that at first, but now I do. So again, I appreciate you for giving me some insight. I appreciate you for helping me understand. It does mean a lot. It's disappointing, it's scary, and it's a bit worrying. But when you're in the position of influential power where you have the ability to access literally millions of people, you also got to be careful of how many of those people could you be harming. Be that intentional or not, there are still people who could be hurt in the process, and that's something you really need to consider. And then obviously you get into the realm of the program itself. A lot of calorie expenditure work. Some people may be doing these programs for reasons that may not be intended by the creator. Just when you're, like I said, marketing to those who may have suffered or are currently suffering, this much calorie expenditure work and cardio, and almost like this much volume and this much work in general is probably not the best, to be honest. I'm sure this is not designed as an eating disorder recovery program, but it was kind of being marketed like it was. Whereas if the marketing changed and that was kind of removed and it was more targeting general fitness, the structure, the volume, the layout would be more acceptable. But due to how it is being marketed, it is not so much. Like I said, with all my videos, these are merely my opinions. You don't have to agree with my opinions. You may in fact disagree, and that's absolutely fine. Just know that I appreciate you for taking the time out of your day to even be here and watch it, and maybe even make it this far if you have. But I'm not ever bashing Sarah personally. I don't know her personally. I'm sure her intentions are good, and I appreciate the good that she is doing for the industry. It's just things like this are concerning and are quite upsetting. In all honesty, I feel like just a bit more consideration, accountability and responsibility would probably have gone a long way. I've also heard, I don't know if this is true, I've just heard that Sarah has been deleting comments and criticisms of the program, kind of similar criticisms to the ones I'm presenting here, which I'm hoping is not true. But if it were true, I wouldn't be surprised, because I have seen a lot of other creators do that, unfortunately. If you do need someone to talk to, just know that I'm here. Granted, sometimes I may be a bit slow with replies, but I will always reply to everybody, even if it just takes me a little bit of time. I just want to make sure I can give you the time and the effort that you deserve and require. Regardless of how far you are on your journey, blips are normal. Progression is never linear. I mean, there will be ups, there will be downs, but there will be ups again after them. You also have to understand that just because you're not where you want to be now doesn't mean you won't be where you want to be in the future. There may be a few deviations from the path along the way, but you're still going to get to that end point. I can assure you of two things. If you stick with it, you will get to the end point, which is the destination, which is the recovery that you are desiring. But I can also assure you that quitting is not going to get you there. Be patient with yourself, be kind to yourself, and understand that although you may not be proud of yourself, I'm proud of you. But that is it. That is the video. Now, we will very quickly crack on with comment question of the week. I'll make sure it isn't a long one, because I know I've probably kept you for a lot longer than you would like to be here. So again, thank you for being here. I wonder what other movements you would suggest instead of front squat / goblet squat. It makes sense what you say about your upper body running out before your legs do. A few videos back in the Gymshark video, I think, I stated how I think front squats and goblet squats are not great for quad hypertrophy because other areas are going to fatigue before your quads do, like your serratus, your arms, all sorts. So regarding what I would usually recommend instead, I think split squats are fantastic, especially if you strap up so grip is no longer a limiting factor. I also think movements like the leg press are fantastic, and the hack squat are also fantastic. So these are movements that allow you to go to failure, or very close to failure, safely, whilst also ensuring that the muscles you're looking at targeting, which in this case are the quads, are fatiguing faster than other muscles will hopefully be fatiguing. Therefore, deem them potentially better or more optimal for hypertrophy, and we know obviously hypertrophy is the building of muscle. Like I said at the start of the video, 1100 likes in the first 24 hours is the goal, so if we can shoot for that, that'd be bloody fantastic. If you haven't already, please do consider clicking the red button down below and subscribing to the channel, and maybe even the bell next to it so you get notified when I upload every week, twice a week. And if you have a question that you want me to answer at the end of the next video, drop it down below in the comment section for comment question of the week and I shall do so. And don't forget, Monday's video, we're going to cover Blow Galates and her 90-day muscle building challenge, I believe it is, or something along those lines. So stay tuned for that one. Thank you for tolerating me. Thank you for tolerating my ramble, my waffle and my sunglasses. And thank you for tolerating the video.